Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are heading somewhere that I think sits at the very top of the collective bucket list. We're talking about Hawaii, but I want to try something a little different today.
So we're skipping the top 10 beaches list.
We are skipping the beaches, the Mai Tais, and the hula lessons. Well, actually, we might get to the hula, but, from a very different angle.
Yeah.
We are looking at the fundamental act of just getting there. Because the modern experience is so deceptively simple. You get on a plane, watch a couple of movies, eat some pretzels, and boom, 6 hours later, you're in paradise. It feels automatic.
It is automatic now, but for, 99% of human history, reaching Hawaii was arguably the single most difficult, most intentional feat of exploration possible.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about finding the most isolated major archipelago on Earth, thousands of miles from anywhere. No safety net.
That is the theme we are unpacking today. We've got this really fascinating stack of historical archives and some on-the-ground notes from Halia Private Tours. And we're looking at Hawaii as a destination of intention.
I like that framing.
The core idea is that nobody arrived in Hawaii by accident. Until, very recently, you had to want it. And you had to have the technology to survive the journey.
And that's true whether we're talking about a double-hulled canoe in the year 1000 or a steamship in the 1800s. Every single method of travel tells a story.
A story about technology and about what people valued.
Exactly.
So let's go back to the absolute beginning. The source material references a creation chant, which is basically the genealogy of the islands. And it has this incredible line, something about life beginning in deep darkness.
And descending from the stars to the sea.
From the stars to the sea. It's beautiful poetry, but you're saying it's also something more.
If you look at it through the lens of history, it's also a surprisingly accurate logbook. It captures exactly how the first wayfinders found these islands. They didn't stumble upon them, they were guided by the sky.
I think this is where we have to break a common stereotype. I remember those textbook illustrations of, primitive people just drifting on rafts.
Looking scared, yeah.
And the research here suggests that's completely wrong.
It's insulting, honestly. These were master navigators. They treated the Pacific Ocean, which, remember, covers a third of the planet, not as a barrier, but as a highway.
A highway?
They developed this. Call it a technology of nature science. It allowed them to process massive amounts of data without a single mechanical instrument. Let's get technical on this because the how is just mind-blowing. The sources list the specific data points they were tracking. It starts with the stars, obviously.
Right. They memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars. They created a mental star compass. But, the sky is only half the picture. If it was cloudy, they looked down. They read the ocean swells.
This is the part I have trouble wrapping my head around. How do you read a wave in the middle of the ocean?
You have to distinguish between the local chop, the waves made by the wind right there,
What?
and the deep ocean swells. Those are generated by storms thousands of miles away.
Okay.
And those deep swells move in consistent patterns. When they hit an island, they bounce back. They create a specific interference pattern.
So the canoe itself is a sensory instrument.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A master navigator could sit inside the hull, close their eyes, and just feel the difference in the vibration. They could feel an island hundreds of miles away.
Wow. Just by the way the canoe pitched and rolled. And the sources also mention reading clouds and birds, which sounds a bit like reading tea leaves, but there's hard science to it.
How does that work?
It's pure physics. Clouds reflect what's underneath them. Out in the deep blue ocean, the bottoms of the clouds are dark. But if there's a shallow lagoon with white sand,
The cloud above it will have a greenish tint.
you got it. And you can see that reflection from over the horizon long before you see the land itself.
And the birds.
That's all about behavior patterns. There are land birds that fly out to fish in the morning, and they have to return at dusk. So if you see one flying away from you at sunset,
You follow it. It's going home to land.
but you have to know which bird. If you see a seabird that sleeps on the water, you ignore it. It's about knowing the biology to navigate the geography.
The scale of this network is what really shocked me. We always talk about the European age of exploration, but these Polynesian voyagers, they had them beat by centuries. The theory is they started near Taiwan.
Right, moving down through the Philippines and then just fanning out across the Pacific. We have evidence they reached Madagascar, crossing the entire Indian Ocean.
And in the other direction, They hit the Americas.
beating the Vikings and Columbus by a long shot. But the most chilling detail, literally, is the Antarctic connection.
What?
There are oral histories describing a voyage into a region of frozen rocks and white currents where the sea turned solid.
It has to be the ice shelf.
1,000 years before Europeans ever saw Antarctica, they had a mental map of the entire Pacific Basin.
Which brings us to the stories they told to preserve that map. We have to talk about the legends. Thanks to Disney, everyone knows Maui.
Right.
But the source material frames him very differently.
He's less of a cartoon character and
Yeah.
more of a data storage device. If you don't have a written language, you encode complex information into memorable stories. So take Maui lassoing the sun to make the day longer.
I always thought that was just a myth about why summer days are long.
But think about it as a navigator. As you sail from the equator toward the tropics, towards Hawaii, the days literally get longer in the summer. Maui, slowing the sun, is a metaphor for the changing latitude. If you know the story, you know what happens to the sun as you sail north.
And fishing up islands.
Have you ever been on a boat approaching an island from far away?
Sure. It looks like it's rising out of the water.
Precisely. You don't descend upon an island, you pull it up from the horizon. The story is a mnemonic device.
That completely reframes the mythology for it. It's the same with the volcano goddess, right?
Exactly. We think of her as the fire lady in the crater, but look at her story. She's described as a traveler first. She's exiled, travels by canoe, and she's searching for fire.
Which is active volcanism.
Right, and she settles in Kilauea after displacing a rival. That sounds an awful lot like a migration history, doesn't it? It records the movement of people and the geology of the islands.
And then there's the ancestor, Hawaiiloa. The notes say he's the key to this whole intention thesis.
Yes. The legend says he found the islands using the stars, but then he turned around and sailed back to his homeland to get his family.
That's it, isn't it? You can stumble onto an island by luck. You cannot leave it and find it again unless you know exactly what you're doing.
It proves repeatability. It wasn't a one-way drift, it was a two-way highway.
Which eventually led to new arrivals, like chiefs from Tahiti who brought that strict social order, the kapu system. So we have this thriving, complex civilization. And then the timeline jumps to 1778, Captain Cook. The history books always frame this as day one.
Which is a very Eurocentric view. The sources suggest we need to put a big asterisk on that. There's the Spanish theory.
I love this theory. It just makes so much sense geographically.
It does. For over 200 years before Cook, Spanish galleons sailed a loop between the Philippines and Mexico. Hawaii is right in the middle of those trade winds. The probability they never saw the islands is tiny.
And there's physical evidence.
There's a map from 1555, 2 centuries before Cook with islands, at roughly Hawaii's latitude. Plus, accounts of castaways being adopted. It might even explain why some ancient chiefly lines had reddish hair.
So Cook wasn't the first, but he was the one who put Hawaii on the public map. Now, we have to bust a myth here. I was always taught that the Hawaiians thought Cook was a god, Lono.
That is a very sticky narrative, but the source material suggests it's a huge misunderstanding. It's true he arrived during a festival for Lono, and the sails of his ship looked like the banners for the ceremony.
A coincidence of timing.
Right, but the Hawaiians were pragmatic. They saw a ship that was battered, they saw a crew that was filthy, exhausted, riddled with scurvy. They realized pretty quickly these are not gods.
These are men with really good tech who were in terrible shape.
Exactly. It was a diplomatic assessment, not a religious one. They treated him with the respect due a high chief, but they knew he was mortal.
And that pragmatism, it extended to how they handled the world opening up. I was surprised by how quickly Hawaiians started traveling out.
Oh, they were incredibly proactive. We have the story of Chief Kaiana. As soon as foreign ships became regulars, he booked passage. He went to China, the Pacific Northwest.
He was doing recon.
He was gathering intel, looking for the red mouth weapon.
Muskets.
He saw the size of the world and realized warfare was about to change. He knew Hawaii needed to upgrade its military technology to survive.
Which leads us directly to Kamehameha, the man who unified the islands. His story is just, it's almost cinematic.
It really is. His birth coincided with Halley's Comet, a star with a tail. The prophecy said this great light would herald a killer of chiefs.
And he fulfilled it. But he did it by being smarter than everyone else about these new foreign tools. This explains the Hawaiian flag, right? People are always confused about why the Union Jack is in the corner.
It confuses everyone. Hawaii was never a British colony, but Kamehameha formed a close alliance with the British captain, George Vancouver.
It was a strategic move.
Totally. Vancouver gave him a flag, and Kamehameha flew it to tell other foreign powers, like the French and Americans, back off, I'm with the British. It was a geopolitical force field.
And Vancouver didn't just bring flags. He brought cows.
This is one of my favorite facts. Hawaii had cowboys before Texas.
Long before the American Wild West.
Vancouver dropped off some longhorn cattle as a gift. Kamehameha put a royal protection, a kapu, on them, so the herd exploded. They went wild.
So they had to hire help.
They brought in Mexican vaqueros, the original cowboys, to teach Hawaiians how to ride and rope. They called them pañolo, a Hawaiianization of Espanol. That whole cowboy culture you see on the Big Island, it's deep, authentic history.
The monarchy just kept playing on this global stage. King Kalakaua, the Merry Monarch, was the first king of any nation to circumnavigate the globe.
A massive distinction, not the first Hawaiian, the first monarch. He met the Emperor of Japan, leaders in Europe, the U.S. president. He was studying railroads, governance.
He was trying to build a modern Pacific empire. And the queens were just as impressive. Queen Kapiolani and Liliuokalani went to London for Queen Victoria's Jubilee.
And the notes are clear on this. They conversed as equals. They were recognized as sophisticated royalty.
There's also this human rights element that connects all the way back. The law of the splintered paddle.
This is the moral foundation of the kingdom from Kamehameha's time. It guaranteed the safety of non-combatants. It said anyone, old men, women, children, could lie down by the roadside and sleep in safety.
That sounds like the precursor to the entire hospitality industry.
In a way it is. It established Hawaii as a safe zone. If you stepped onto that shore, you were under the king's protection. That concept is what made the later tourism boom even possible.
So let's talk about that boom. How do we get from trading sandalwood to the Sheraton Waikiki? The notes say it started with a shift in logistics. A harbor.
It's a physics problem. Most islands are surrounded by reefs. Early ships had to anchor way out and row goods in through the surf. You could lose your whole cargo in one wave.
But Honolulu was different.
Honolulu had a deep, calm, protected harbor. A ship could pull right up to the land. That safety drew the merchants, then the government, then the money. That's why Honolulu is the capital.
And then technology sped things up. Steamships.
The steamships condensed travel from months to just days. But it was exclusive. Tickets were expensive. This was the era of the wealthy traveler with steamer trunks, staying for weeks.
And then Hollywood sold the dream.
The 1930s and 40s.
Yeah.
Radio shows like Hawaii Calls, Bing Crosby movies, they manufactured this image of the Pacific paradise. But even then, it was a longboat ride or a very expensive flight on a propeller plane.
Until the jet engine.
The jet engine is the great disruption. It cut travel time in half and dropped the price. Suddenly, a schoolteacher from Kansas could afford to go.
Combine that with statehood in '59.
And the floodgates opened. Mass tourism was born.
Which brings us to today. The research basically highlights two main ways to arrive now. Flights or cruises.
And they are very different experiences. The flight is fast, but it dumps you right into the rental car line. You're on your own.
Versus the cruise ship. The notes mention the Pride of America.
Yeah, that's a special case because it's a U.S. flagship. It can just circle the islands without having to visit a foreign port. It's incredibly efficient. You see 4 islands in a week without unpacking.
But you miss something, don't you?
You miss the nights. You miss connecting to the land when the sun goes down because you're back on the ship. It's a sampler platter, not a deep dive.
And once you are on the ground, the challenge isn't finding the island anymore. The source from Halia Private Tours makes a really interesting point about this. They talk about a guide being a cultural buffer.
Right. You have this huge problem with tourists following Instagram geotags onto private property or sacred land. A good local guide acts like a modern navigator. They know the currents of the community. They keep you out of trouble and give you context.
It turns a sightseeing trip into a learning trip.
Exactly. It restores a bit of that respect from the old wayfinding tradition.
Speaking of restoring tradition, we have to close the loop on the navigation story. The notes mention the hokulea. This is maybe the most inspiring part of the whole timeline.
It is the full circle. In the 1970s, a lot of academics were skeptical. Some historians claimed the ancient Hawaiians just drifted there by accident, that their stories were myths.
That must have been so insulting.
It was. So a group of Hawaiians and anthropologists decided to prove them wrong. They built a replica of a voyaging canoe, the hokulea. But they had a problem. The knowledge had been lost in Hawaii.
So they had to import an expert.
They found Maup, a master navigator from a tiny island in Micronesia where the tradition was still alive. He agreed to teach them.
And the test was the voyage to Tahiti.
Hawaii to Tahiti. Over 2,000 miles. No compass, no sextant, no iPhone, just the stars, the swells, and the birds.
Yeah.
They hit it perfectly. They arrived in Tahiti to a crowd of 17,000 people. It proved that the science was real. It proved the oral histories were accurate.
And today?
Today, the Hokulea has sailed around the world. There's a whole new generation of young navigators who can read the ocean just as well as their ancestors did.
It really brings it all back to that opening line, from the stars to the sea.
It shows that the technology of the past wasn't primitive, it was just different. It relied on human perception and focus, not digital sensors.
So if we zoom out, what's the mission here? Why does this matter to someone who just wants a vacation?
I think it changes the texture of the experience. When you understand Hawaii is a place defined by intentional arrivals, you stop acting like you're just cargo being delivered. You realize that whether you came on a canoe or 737, you are stepping into a continuum of exploration. You're the latest chapter in the logbook.
Right. When you step off that plane and that warm, heavy air hits you, you're feeling the same welcome that sailors have been chasing for a millennium.
It adds a layer of gravity to the
I
relaxation.
love that. I want to leave everyone with a thought to chew on. The original wayfinders found these tiny specks of land in the world's biggest ocean just by noticing the subtle signals. The temperature of the water, the flight of a bird, the tint of a cloud.
Signals that were always there but required silence to see.
Exactly. So in our world of constant notifications, high-speed data, and GPS telling us exactly where to turn, what signals in our own lives are we missing? What islands are we failing to discover simply because we've forgotten how to look up from our screens and read the clouds?
That is the question.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.